I never thought family could turn against you until they came for my child. It started like any ordinary Saturday afternoon. I had planned a quiet day at home with my 7-year-old daughter, Mia. We were curled up on the couch, the afternoon sun streaming through the window, casting a warm glow over our little living room. I flipped through channels, searching for something we could enjoy together. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister, Lila. "Can you bring Mia over? Mom and Dad want to see her." My heart sank. Ever since my parents had learned I was raising Mia as a single mother, their disapproval had been palpable. They'd never outright said it, but the judgment was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lila, always the peacekeeper, insisted it was just a visit. "They miss her," she wrote. But I felt the weight of their unspoken expectations, the suffocating pressure of their traditional views. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "Okay, we'll be there in a bit." As we drove to my parents' house, I tried to brush off my anxiety. Mia chatted happily in the back seat, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that ran through our family. I wanted her to feel welcomed and loved, but the thought of my parents' judgment gnawed at me. When we arrived, my parents greeted us with forced smiles that felt more like masks than genuine warmth. "There's my little sunshine," my dad said, ruffling Mia's hair, his voice overly cheerful. Mom stood back, arms crossed, her eyes scanning Mia like a hawk, assessing everything from her clothes to her hair. As the afternoon wore on, the atmosphere shifted. Lila had brought her own children, and while they played with Mia, I could sense my parents' discomfort. Their whispers were hushed but harsh, like the rustle of dry leaves. I tried to join the conversation, to lighten the mood, but the weight of their disapproval pressed down like a heavy blanket. "Have you thought about enrolling Mia in dance class?" Mom suggested, her voice dripping with insincerity. "It's important for little girls to have hobbies, you know." I felt a flare of irritation. "She's happy playing soccer with her friends, Mom. Not every girl has to take ballet." Dad chimed in, "But it's a more refined activity. Something to help her become a lady." A knot twisted in my stomach. I tried to change the subject, but the conversation kept circling back to Mia and their outdated views on femininity. Lila glanced at me, her eyes wide with concern, as if she could sense the storm brewing beneath my surface. Eventually, we decided to head outside for some fresh air. The kids ran around the yard, laughing and playing tag, while the adults stood awkwardly in a cluster, sipping lemonade. I could see Mia's joy, and it broke my heart to think of how my parents viewed her, as if she were a project rather than my daughter. Then, without warning, my dad's voice boomed across the yard. "Mia, come here." She stopped mid-laugh and trotted over, her face bright with curiosity. "Yes, Grandpa." "Tell me, sweetheart, do you think you're pretty?" he asked, his tone oddly serious. My heart dropped. "Dad, that's..." Mia looked up at him, her small face scrunched in confusion. I guess so." Dad nodded, a satisfied smile creeping across his face. "Good. Because you should always remember that. Pretty girls get more attention." I felt a rush of anger. "That's not what matters, Dad. She should know she's smart, kind, and capable, not just pretty." The tension crackled like static in the air. Lila tried to defuse the situation, but the damage was done. My parents exchanged glances, their expressions cold and judgmental. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I knew we needed to leave. "Mia, let's go," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. As we packed up, I caught snippets of their hushed conversation. "She's too sensitive," I heard Mom say. "It's not good for Mia to be raised by someone like her." The words twisted like a knife in my gut. We drove home in silence. Mia sensed my distress but didn't know how to articulate it. "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us?" she finally asked. "No, sweetheart," I replied, forcing a smile. "They're just confused." But deep down, I knew that their confusion ran deeper. It was rooted in a belief that I didn't fit into their picture of a perfect family. As we settled in for the night, I tucked Mia into bed, my heart heavy with the weight of it all. I read her a story, trying to erase the day's shadows, but the unease lingered. The following days unfolded normally, but the cracks in my family's facade widened. My parents started making passive-aggressive comments about how I was raising Mia. She needs structure, Mom would say, her tone dripping with condescension. You can't just let her run wild. I bit my tongue, refusing to engage. I didn't want to create more conflict, but their comments chipped away at my confidence as a parent. Then came the phone call. I was in the middle of preparing dinner when my phone buzzed. It was Lila, her voice shaky and urgent. You need to come over. Now. What happened? I asked, my heart racing. It's about Mom and Dad. They're not being themselves. It's about Mia. What do you mean? They think she needs to be fixed. They're talking about getting her to behave properly. I think they're planning something. Panic surged through me. I'm on my way. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense, filled with an electric charge that made my skin crawl. Lila stood at the entrance, her eyes wide with fear. They've been saying things that don't make sense. You need to stop them. We moved quietly into the living room, where my parents sat, expressions eerily calm. There you are, Dad said, his voice unsettlingly cheerful. We've been waiting for you. Waiting for what? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. Just a little family intervention, Mom said, her smile tight. We're worried about Mia. We want to help her, you know. Make sure she turns out right. What are you talking about? I demanded, my heart racing. She's fine. She's a happy kid. Happy kids need guidance, Dad replied, his eyes narrowing. We think she could use some discipline. Lila stepped forward, her voice firm. You can't do this. She's not some project for you to fix. Their expressions shifted, anger flickering beneath the surface. You don't understand, Mom hissed. We know what's best for her. At that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about Mia. It was about control, about their inability to accept that I had chosen a different path. My blood boiled. You don't own her, and you certainly don't get to decide what's best for her life. She's not a doll for you to dress up in your ideals. The silence that followed felt suffocating. My parents' faces hardened, and in that moment, I knew the family I had loved was slipping away, replaced by something dark and unrecognizable. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed Lila's hand and stormed out. We're leaving, I declared, my voice steady despite the fear curling in my stomach. You can't have her. As we drove away, I felt the weight of 1,000 emotions crash over me, relief, fear, and a profound sense of loss. My parents had shown their true colors, and I knew I couldn't expose Mia to that toxicity anymore. From that day on, I distanced myself from them. I focused on building a safe, loving environment for Mia, free from their expectations and judgments. But the memory of that day lingers like a ghost, a reminder that family isn't always a source of support, it can also become a place of fear and control. Years later, when Mia asked about her grandparents, would simply tell her that some people love differently. I hoped she would never have to face the kind of discrimination I had. And as I watched her grow into a strong, independent girl, I found solace in knowing that, despite the darkness, we had each other.